of a sudden you realize you start to understand women. All this while you were treating your ex-girlfriend or ex-wife or whoever it is as a man, logic battling them, telling them they're all up in their feelings and their emotions. And that's actually a real misdeed I think men historically have done, is being like, oh, you're in your feelings, you're not being logical, you're being stupid. But it's nothing more or less than the feminine nature, is to be in flow, to be in the moment, to be in emotions at all times. When you start to learn that feminine within yourself, simply your heart, your emotions, your feelings, when you're able to really work with them and feel them and give space for them and sometimes surrender to them and sometimes be, a victim to them and all of it, you get a glimpse into the life of a woman. And then it gives us the facility to hopefully be in integrity to lead women deeper into their emotions, vulnerably, honestly, and create this connection where there's massive trust.
Men today have been trained to operate from a place of disempowerment and disconnection. Now, how do we do that? We do that by allowing external factors such as our job demands, uninspiring relationships, fleeting desires, and addictions to impact our health, our mood, and our reality. Thus, as we easily then fall into victimhood in the circumstances of life, and allows us to lose power over our lives. Yet many men get paralyzed over intellectualizing and problem solving. And I got to tell you, when I thought about that is a challenge that for sure something that I'd like to overcome get better at. But by taking ownership of developing our biologically given masculine traits, our presence, our power, clarity, and awareness, we can fortify our lives as we build our resilience through disciplined accountability of our habits and our actions. Our careers then can really become purpose-driven. It's our intimate relationships with the women of our dreams that become centered, not just on sexual passion, but on trust and empowerment that leads us to an interesting yet a stress-free lifestyle. And ultimately, we're going to become masters of our lives. Now, we're going to get into a bit more of this, but before we do that, I just want to remind you that if you're interested in raising your standards as a father and a husband and an entrepreneur, then I'm going to encourage you to participate in our Band of Brothers group mentorship program. We're a group of ordinary guys working towards living extraordinary lives. And you can find more information about this at the Awakened Man Training Academy at members.awakenedman.net. With that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement and your host, Alan DeMonso. Allow me to ask you a question. Which aspect of your life are you a master of? Is it discipline, awareness, and presence, courage? Maybe it's living from your truth, or maybe it's your personal power, or you have a great clarity of vision. Andy Frisella is famous for saying that personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion, and I couldn't agree more. And as men today, we've been led to believe that being masculine is toxic, regardless of how it reveals itself. Yet this perspective is framed against the worst in society. So it never really acknowledges that more than that, anything more than that. And masculinity has served to be the growth of civilization. Now, could we be better as men? Absolutely. Should we throw the baby out with the bathwater? I'd say no. Well, today, my guest is going to share with us how his men's work is guiding us to become men of mastery. Allow me to introduce my guest. Karl Lashkari is the founder of the Men of Mastery. Karl works with men to optimize their physiological wellness and step into their innate masculinity to up-level their lives in all aspects. He leads men in communities in 5 different countries and has a couple of virtual programs to help men transform their journeys. Welcome to the show, Karl. How are things, brother?
Things are really good. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. Karl, in our men's work here, we always talk about everyone being on their own hero's quest. And so my first question for you is to tell us about a time in your life when you knew things had to change. What did you do about that? And how did that experience shape you into the man you are today and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like most men, my hero's journey is what brought me to this place and doing the service I'm doing and the passion I have. So about 4 years ago, I was a management consultant. So before that, I was working in the world of hedge funds. And then I worked as a technology management consultant for digital transformations, Internet of Things, smart devices, kind of creeping into AI a little bit, which we all know about right now. And, I was working consulting hours, 60 to 80-hour weeks, 4 flights a week, just flying around, moving around. Then I would tell myself, hey, I'm making all this money, but I don't have time to really do anything. So, weekend, just play hard, go. I'd fly to Miami every single weekend, from halfway across the country to go scuba diving, salsa dancing, party all night, whatever it was, or sometimes all of the above. And yeah, and then eventually my body crashed. And I ended up coming down with a chronic illness, which I had for about 3 years. I was disabled. 1 year, I was completely immobile in a dark room, light sensitive, sound sensitive, brain inflammation, cognitive dysfunction, pain throughout the body, fatigue, all of it. And really, really saw what it was to be removed from the world. And, those moments are the moments which wake you up, right?
Yeah.
And for me, knew I couldn't work, had to stop working, everything, and starting my what you call it, spiritual journey, personal development journey, growth journey of getting really into the mind, the body, the nervous system, emotions. And, I didn't know which thing it was that I had to heal because medical system had nothing for me. You go on the internet and then there's a community of people who have what I was diagnosed with. It took me a year to get diagnosed. And even then, it's just the chronic fatigue syndrome, myalgic encephalomyelitis. It's just the blanket term for, I don't know. It's the whole system going on. So yeah, I got into lots of meditation and breath work and changing the nervous system with breath work and emotional release. That's when I got brought into men's work, really working on freeing stuck emotions, releasing stuck emotions. And then I also got into the other side of the masculinity work and realizing that a big reason I was in that place is because I was a nice guy. I picked up the book No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover, and I was like, holy cow, this was written for me. And I think a lot of people say that. And basically realizing that, in a relationship where just suppressed, in pain, not knowing if things are going on behind my back, but not really having the cojones to do anything or say anything or any of it. So realizing that there's so much freedom I gained from connecting with my feminine, my heart, my emotions, all of it. But there's also freedom in setting boundaries and guiding my life, leading my life, and doing it on my terms and connecting with my masculine. So really coming to terms that the word health means very many things. That's what I learned is it's not one symptom you treat. It's just, are you living in alignment or are you not living in alignment? That's the way I like to say it. Are you aligned to your heart, your soul, your truth of what you were born into, or are you just being somebody else? And that was the journey I got to walk on, and I'm still walking on, but with more clarity, more understanding, more experience.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great way to kick off the interview today, our conversation, Karl. I'm just jotting a bunch of notes here, and I just thought, you made a comment. I didn't know what thing to heal and how, and I just think back to all in our lives, how many times have we all been at that threshold where we know things are wrong, we know things need to change, but we just don't know what it is to heal. And you were ended up by starting to make a decision then. So tell us a little bit more about that. You were going on to about, trying a bunch of different things, but ultimately in that year of being in that dark place and not being immobile, what was the mindset and how did you start to shift that? What was the catalyst that really started to turn that fire back on for you?
Yeah. So real quick to you saying that you don't know what it is and there's signs of it. There were signs of it before I actually fell sick. I was getting flus and, my immune system was nothing. And every 2 months, something or another, but I had this tough, man, got to power through it, got to force through it. Literally in the consulting industry, it's not an easy path. It's really put up at a pedestal to act that way, to be tough to a point of fake toughness. And I had the warning signs. I had the falling sick, the coughs, the sneezes, and just ignored them. Didn't have time for it. In terms of your question, in the year that I had, in terms of finding the direction, it was just throwing stuff at the wall. It was just, I was fortunate that I'd moved to San Diego, California, where there's a huge conscious community and spiritual community. So I was somebody who actually didn't really, I say these words, I didn't believe in any of that. Didn't believe in energy, very, very just cut and dry physical manifestations, life is physics. And I mean, most people who have this condition have it for their whole life, unfortunately. 30 years, 40 years. There's a campaign which, to shout it out, it's called the Millions Missing campaign for people with such invisible illnesses. And I really didn't know if I was going to make it out of it. And the odds were against it. And then when you go on the Facebook groups and you go on the internet and you think you're really against it. But I did have a inner will. I'm someone who did overcome other heroes' journeys in my life. Had a brother who passed away when I was a child, when I was 5 years old. I lost 75 pounds when I was 22. I had a lot of issues with women, lost my virginity at a very late age, and went from that to overcoming all of that. So I knew that I was put on this to figure it out and to help people out. And, not to say that I had this tough, strong, no, I cried. I was in fear. I would think about, okay, how long can I actually live this kind of a life? And all those things go through your mind. And the beautiful thing about this was all the other things I overcame with more willpower, more force, more perseverance. This was one that every time I exercised any bit of willpower or perseverance, I got knocked back. It got worse. So I got to learn the art of surrender. Surrender while moving without giving up. And yeah, just listening to the body, learning how to listen to the nervous system, learning how to listen to my emotions, learning how to listen to literally my liver, my stomach, everything in a way that I didn't even know that was humanely possible. They don't teach that in school, do they? Yeah. So yeah, and then just slowly uncovering one onion, one layer at a time. Probably engaging 40, 50 different healing modalities, and just really, at first it was 30 minutes a day I could put into it. And then I worked it up to hours and hours. And here I am. If I could tell you the one thing that did it, I couldn't tell you that. But like I said earlier, just learning to live in alignment.
Yeah, I really like that idea about living in alignment and coming into, really embodying the piece. And what I like is that you've used you discovered a recipe that worked for you, and being able to really transform, I believe, some of that into your men's work. And so, because you've gone through this journey now and you've dealt with some of the mental health side aspects of what it means to be masculine and be men today, what are you finding now in the work that you're doing with men? What are the mental health challenges that they're facing in the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So I would say that there's a few different paths you can take when it comes from coming back from mental illness. And to simplify something that's not so simple, I say there's two types of men. There's the nice guys who are overly emotional, have no real faculty over their emotions, but they have emotions, pushover, overly compliant, say yes to something they're not really yes to. And then there's I don't really have a term for it, but people who are more of the, I'll step on you before I fail. They use their power, and I've worked with many of those men as well. However, that's not what I've niched into. I've niched into the nice guy because that's who I was. And it's really funny how once I hear 2 or 3 things in their life, it's not too hard to list off 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm sure you've seen this. And just the pattern of, falling into relationships, not leading into relationships, into being in a job where, they're making money, but not satisfied, not fulfilled, not feeling purpose, and also not being able to set boundaries around their hours, their health, time with family, all of that. Just yes, sir, overly compliant. Not very health focused, but actually that's not true. Health focused, but from the way the Western world teaches us, and that's lift a lot of weights, like more sympathetic nervous system pushing type activities as opposed to, tapping into more rest and relaxation. So those are some things you see, and I've seen it manifest in physical illness with others as well. Happy to say that I've helped people through it and come back to normal as well. And even though I would say there's not one recipe, when you trial and error enough things, there are similar patterns that come into this around mental health, emotional health. So the way you think, the way you feel, how you act based on your truth. And then, of course, the true toxins, environment, nutrition, etc.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I really like how you talked about moving away from the being aware of not just falling into relationship, right? And I think how easy do we just do that, right? I think I've heard it said that men tend to fall into love quickly, and yet when relationships separate, it takes a lot. It's harder for us to separate from a broken relationship. And I think as we get older as well, it can be even more devastating for guys, because a lot of our identity can be focused around, as we talked about in the opening, coming in, about our careers, our relationships, and being able to have some sort of separation. And so that's what I was really intrigued with your work, is that you really take a holistic look at what our lives are all about. And so tell me a little bit more about your program, Men of Mastery, and how that is shaping men's lives.
Yeah. And there's a reason I take that holistic approach, because if you show up as a man in one area of your life, whether it's a strong man, a weak man, or anything in between, it's going to show up in all areas of your life. All the marketing coaches have told me, you got to niche down, do dating, do wellness, do business. But I'm like, it's not the outcome. I used to be a person of outcomes, but it's not the outcome we're going for. It's being the man who gets these things. And usually it all comes together. Usually it all goes together. So yeah, I have a program which I'm running right now called the Masculine Mastery Method. And that's really about working with our inner state to bring out the masculinity within us. And it's more than just masculinity. We focus on our mental health, we focus on our emotional health, clearing that all up, because I firmly believe those are precursors. If you build masculinity on top of a weak foundation, it just becomes very emotionally attached and angry, and not the type of men and leaders we want in this world, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
But when you clear out, you bring the mind to center, you bring the emotions to center, you become responsive to your emotions intentionally without being reactive to them, then you can build that masculine frame on top of it. And I run a program where I focus on 8 areas of masculinity. The first is open awareness and groundedness, more of a mindfulness piece. The second is connecting with our heart and our sensitivity, a little bit more feminine if you want to be specific. But the third is connecting with our courage and our inner freedom. The next is connecting with our truths, living our truth, speaking our truth from both integrity and discernment, 2 types of truth. The next is owning our personal power, stepping into our leadership and leading at all times, leading ourselves, leading our women, leading our children, leading our colleagues. But leading ourselves comes first. And then the last is wrapping this all up with levity and humor, living with a sense of lightness, levity, keeping that nervous system calm, because, as men, we can store tension and constriction so easily.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I just walk people through embodiment exercises, energy work exercises, mind exercises. This is not about a list of things you should do. This is not about any kind of dogma. This is every person, it's individual, what masculinity means to you. And we uncover the conditioning that's covered up your masculinity. And then we flex the muscles, just like going to gym, of the energies of your primal masculinity, which is not something you're taking from outside and implementing, something you're opening up that you were born with. All of you.
Man, I just love that. I love how that whole process works. And we start with that opening of us and giving that opportunity. I always say it's like cracking the walnut. You give us an opportunity to really experience life differently, because we have these these conditions that we've been raised in and we've embedded into our lives. And it takes courage to be able to recognize that some of these programs just don't work anymore. They're not serving us. And having a powerful facilitator such as yourself can help us start to shift those perspectives. And so I think the work that you're doing is outstanding, and we need more of that.
Appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, and I know you talked about earlier on. You talked about really giving this merging of this masculine and feminine. So tell me a little bit more about how you're empowering men in their masculinity and with the women in their femininity to create more a trusting and passionate and long-lasting relationship. Because really, let's face it, there's aspects of both of those energies in both individuals in a relationship. So tell me a little bit more about that work that you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm someone who believes in the relationship part is huge. A lot of us come to this work because of relationships, right? It's like, so many of the men who are, either they're in relationships with someone they didn't really fully choose from their power, or they're in relationships where, the sexuality has fallen, or there's nagging, criticizing, his respect for him, empowerment for him is disappearing. And the first thing I'll say is the one gift that we have as men is, as men, we can really hold ourselves accountable fully for all of it. That's not to say that people can treat you like crap or people can misbehave, and no, but you're still accountable for setting that boundary. You're still accountable for guiding them. Feminine women are generally, in this day and age, we have to specify that, but feminine women are generally just submissive all around, open to be guided. Even the girl who you think is being a boss or is being really aggressive, and usually those are the women that really yearn to be guided. And now some are able to be, others it's a harder one. But as men, we do have that power. And I don't say the word power lightly, because with that power, we have to be in integrity with that power. But we have the power of being the leaders within the two genders, and naturally innate leaders. And when we're able to understand our feminine, crack our emotions, get into energy, guess what? All of a sudden you realize you start to understand women. All this while you were treating your ex-girlfriend or ex-wife or whoever it is as a man, logic battling them, telling them they're all up in their feelings and their emotions. And that's actually a real misdeed I think men historically have done, is being like, oh, you're in your feelings, you're not being logical, you're being stupid. But it's nothing more or less than the feminine nature, is to be in flow, to be in the moment, to be in emotions at all times. When you start to learn that feminine within yourself, I'm not talking about, dressing up and, wearing dresses or anything like that, but simply your heart, your emotions, your feelings. We all have it as human beings. We all have feelings. When you're able to really work with them and feel them and give space for them, and sometimes surrender to them, and sometimes be, a victim to them, and all of it, you get a glimpse into the life of a woman, except for exponentially more than what we experience. And then it gives us the facility to hopefully be in integrity, to lead women deeper into their emotions, vulnerably, honestly, and create this connection where there's massive trust, where you're not going to take advantage of that openness, that trust, that heart. And if you're able to lead a woman through her emotions and not use it for your own short-term fixes or needs, guess what? The heart opens, trust opens. And it's a responsibility. It's more accountability for you as a man. But again, as men, we hold ourselves accountable. Good things happen. Nothing happens to me. I don't fall in love. I lead into love. Yeah. I don't get heartbroken. I didn't lead or was not aware of something properly. That's not to say people can't misbehave. People can't do misdeeds. Yes. But when you take accountability, we take the power away from them and we bring it back.
Yeah. Man, you've used this term leading in our relationships and leading women. And I'm just wondering if you've ever encountered a guy say, you know what, I've tried that and it just doesn't work. And, she just won't listen. And what do you say to guys that approach that and maybe not understanding what you're really trying to say by the word leading? Because I think for men, we look at that from a masculine perspective and we don't understand truly how to embody and enact that piece.
Yeah. Let's face it. There's some women who are very hard to lead, even for the best leaders. I don't want to paint a picture that we can create ourselves invincible, because I've made that mistake in my past of like, I can lead anyone. And no, some people are more open, some people are more closed to it based on their trauma, their past relationships, relationship with father, all of it.
Yeah.
But to really lead is to take ownership in a relationship of leading your woman deeper into her emotions from a light side, but also holding her accountable to be responsible and respectful with her emotions with you. So I believe in paradox. There's a light and a dark with everything. And it's to lead the relationship into integrity. You know, integrity can mean many things, right? You can do a monogamous relationship and be in integrity. You can do a polyamorous relationship and be in integrity, but are you being honest? Are you setting frameworks? Are you living within those frameworks? Honesty, truth, communication, all of it. So you lead the relationship into the vision of what you see it being. You know, we travel together, or we live abroad together, or we buy a house together, or we buy a car together, but you're always leading the vision as a man. And the one thing which our modern day society and spurred by feminism has told us is like, don't be overpowering, don't be overbearing. But if you're doing it with love, if you're keeping both in mind, like really the way I like to say it is, whenever you make a decision or you lead as a man, you have to think, is it good for me? Is it good for her? And is it good for us? And if you're principled enough to do that, you can even help make her decisions for her. Because I said this earlier, men have the gift of logic, which a lot of women don't have, of creating a plan and executing on that plan. So leading can go from everything from choosing the restaurant on the date, and then, you know, moving it from date 2 to 3 to 4, all the way to, helping her make career decisions, making career decisions for her. But that's where the integrity piece comes in place if you're gonna really tap into that masculinity.
Well, and what you're saying is that it encourages us to be engaged in our relationships. And I think for some of us, we find that, in my first marriage, for sure, I really took her for granted. It was my high school sweetheart. And after a while, things were just, for too long, as a matter of fact, that's why we're no longer together, that things became, we took each other for granted. And as a man, a young man back then, thinking about the mistakes that I made and how could I do things differently. And I really like how you talked about leading with emotion, leading and understanding her emotion, and then, but yet still having a little framework of accountability, and that works within that emotional piece for her and for the relationship. And I also like how you talked about, is it good for me, her, and us? And so it's a broader perspective, as opposed to picking one side or the other. Does it work for all three? And how we show up then really changes the outcome, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think a lot of men operate from scarcity. Oh, I got to get this, especially sexually, but safety, everything. And then you start to actually, I don't want to say turn into the enemy of your woman, but not be looking out for her best interest. And that's just the worst thing you can do. So to take care of your own inner stuff, to be in a place where you can do that. Yeah.
Well, and it's part of that is that we may be our own worst enemy and not really understand that we're doing that, right? And I think because we're not necessarily, while we are logical, we're not necessarily conscious of our logic and the framework around of what's happening. It, because I think I've found with myself and doing some of the men's work that we do here is that we get really locked into being do mode. And we're great at making plans. We're going to execute, but we forget about the being part. And being present, and what does that look like, and being in there. And so when we're in do mode, then we're not giving ourselves any time whatsoever to become better. Like, what does it take for us to become better men? And that's a different mindset as opposed to just getting things done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would have said the exact same thing myself. We're in alignment there. Is the doing takes away from the ability to be aware of these situations, because as I said earlier, before you take in the leadership, you have to have the mindfulness down, you have to have the emotional intelligence down, and then you have to have communication between both of you, both verbal and nonverbal. So you got to show up. You really want the best relationship. You really want a relationship where you lead and your woman trusts you and you can guide her and she'll really trust your leadership. Yeah, you gotta get right on the inside, because it's not, if it's a power play, if it's just, yeah, I can do anything and I've made a lot of money, so therefore I can lead her. Like, no, there's no relationship there.
Yeah.
To between those two things. And one thing which I just want to highlight, which you said, which was really powerful, is it makes the woman feel engaged. So a lot of modern society, I bet more than half of you are sitting there being like, who is this old school dominating guy? Like, no, you can't lead women. They're independent. They're boss babes. They're on their own power. That's the societal construct. But I don't care about societal constructs. I only care about biology. I only care about our nature. And I can't put a grand sweeping generalization for all women, but most women connected with their femininity will see you leading her, making decisions for her as, whew, that was really hard for me, overthinking it. Thank you. I've had so many women tell me, thank you for doing that, for taking that role, because it's a burden for women to plan and lead and do those such things. So, and it also shows your engagement. It shows you're all in with them, because when you're thinking, oh, your finances, my family, your thing, my thing, we're separate, it's also kind of showing, hey, I'm not fully committing to you. So as long as you're not being domineering about it, but if you're being dominant about it, women actually take that as oh, he cares.
Absolutely, because you're actually willing to step into that aspect of it. And I think that's so powerful. I just love that. Listen, you've been done lots of work, and obviously, and you were talking about, you've been trying lots of different modalities and learning along the way. You must have gotten a few kernels of great advice, but tell me, what was the best piece of advice you've ever given, and how have you implemented that into your life?
It's something you said earlier, but it was told to me again today by one of my coaches, reminded, but it's been something I've been told many times over the last 3 years by a few very important people and mentors in my life. And that's, Karl, you're not a human doer, you're a human being. And I know that that's just the line, but there's so much that goes in with that. Think about it, guys. How many times is your to-do list the main priority in your life? How many times is your calendar, your work calendar, the main priority in your life? How many times do you make excuses for drinking, smoking, not eating right, not spending time with your wife, daughter, son, whoever it is? How many times do you make excuses just to do some shit that's not going to matter down the road? It feels like the most important thing right now. But when it comes to humanity, your humanity, it doesn't matter. So yeah, just stop being a doer and be a beer.
Yeah, love that. I love that. You've been doing, I was saying earlier that you've been doing this work now across several different countries now, and you're doing that. Tell me how that program has expanded and how it is that you're serving men across the globe.
Yeah, so I am a digital nomad and I live in countries for about 4 to 8 months each. And everywhere I go, I decided to open up a free community. And it's just for anyone to join every week. It's usually on Tuesdays, sometimes Wednesdays. And it's just, anyone is welcome to come, and we cover whatever you need. It's a way to get together as men that's outside of sports and drinking and talking about girls, and, and just really going to the depths of who we are, what we need, and just seeing each other, feeling each other, and calling each other forth and sharpening each other's blade to be bigger, greater, stronger as well. So that's something which I've created in San Diego in the United States. I co-created that with a few other men. In Tulum, Mexico, in Colombia, Medellin, still run by another guy, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, Dominican Republic as well.
Nice.
And now here in Brazil.
Oh, outstanding.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation, Karl, but of everything that we've spoken about today, and maybe there wasn't something we had an opportunity to touch on, what would be one takeaway you'd want our listeners to have?
We do this as men, it's to get away from extremism. It's to get away from, I'm a tough, strong guy, nothing can break me. Or the other side of it, I always lose, I always fall short, I just need to cry it out and feel it out and have everyone hear me and listen to me. There's power in both, and there's weakness in both. And when you're able to carry both, when you're able to really own your power, your strength, and your truth, alongside your vulnerability, your humanity, your weakness, and the things that you can't control, there's a solace in that. And I'm just giving that as one example. I can go down a list of 1,000 examples where we go to one extreme, and as men, we create an identity around that extreme. But if you can always be both sides of the extreme and everything in between, it takes a huge, huge load off the shoulder.
Man,
it brings results.
Yeah, man, do I ever love that. It gives us opportunity to experience everything fully, not just one side of the equation, but we get to experience, and then ultimately we can embody that. So what a powerful takeaway. Just want to say once again, thanks, Karl, for spending time with me today. And I think we've left some breadcrumbs for men to become masters of their lives, and if they're willing to truly lean into who they are at their core essence. But if men are interested in getting a hold of you and participating in your work, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So to learn more about Men of Mastery, you can go to www.menofmastery.us. And you can also follow me on all social platforms at Karl Lashkari.
Outstanding. I'm going to make sure all that information is in the show notes for today's episode. You're doing some phenomenal work around the globe, Karl. Thank you so much for being on the show, and what a great conversation we had today.
Thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.